As you may have heard, the Motion Picture Association of America, which rates films, has decided to add smoking as one of its criteria when deciding what kind of rating to give a film. This is an interesting prospect. Obviously, it's new territory. So we're going to consult with one of our good movie buff friends who's also a political whore of the highest order, Mr. Wayne Garcia from Creative Loafing. Hi, Wayne. What do you think about all this?
Hey, Bob. Well, you know, I would say we have Jack Valenti to blame for all this, but now that he's passed on, we really don't have him to blame. You know, it's another step in the growing movement in America, I think, to limit speech and limit the things that we see and do, you know, both for political purposes and because I think as a society, we're really inundated by information and messages, and there's a lot of people who can't process all of that, and some of the ways we see that changing is changing us is to a little more fundamentalism and return to the good old days. Although if we return to the good old days, we'd all be smoking by now, wouldn't we?
Well, you know, these people that advocate freedom, and yet we've become sort of a nanny society where you can't have trans fats, you can't smoke even in the street, you know, in public. Everyone knows what's good for them, but that doesn't mean that the law should require them to do it. Now, the thing with the films is, as I understand it, smoking can be shown, but if it glorifies or glamorizes smoking, then it's more likely to get, what, an R rating? Can you imagine a movie getting an R rating for smoking? And what is a parent going to do when the kid wants to see a movie and the parent looks at the ratings, which is what they're supposed to do, and it says smoking? You know, I mean, there's no sex, no violence, no nudity. Are you going to tell the kid he can't see the movie?
Yeah, you know, the reality is, I think the motion picture people would say, well, you know, this is just a rating to guide the parents. But as you know, this changes the viability of a film to be made financially, whether it has an R rating or a PG-13. And then there's the horrible disconnect from, you pretty much can show as much violence as you want, bodies being blown up, heads being blown off.
Sure.
And the idea that somebody sitting there, you know, Lauren Bacall-like, having a sexy cigarette would kick it into an R rating, whereas some of the other things that we see, you know, I like the idea of ratings as a guide, but I have a problem when we limit then people who can see that and what goes on. You know, that's the parent's job, you know? We're the parents in this thing. If you don't want your kids to see films that have certain things in it, whether it be violence or sex or smoking or whatever, then I think that's up to you as a parent. And but we have this societal movement, and it's politically driven. We have the societal movement to make the world sort of sanitized and safe, so that you don't ever see or hear anything that, God forbid, might challenge your belief system or offend you.
Well, you know, we've had bad people doing bad things in the movies since movies were invented. That's what makes them interesting. The most interesting character in any movie is the villain, if you have one.
Yeah.
And another thing that we've overlooked is the fact that film is essentially an element of visual composition and the photography. And if you're a photographer, you know that smoke is a wonderful thing. If you watch some of these old black and white movies where the smoke trails up and then there's a cloud or even a smoke ring, it's just, it adds to the mood. It creates a visual that helps keep your attention to the story. You
know, I was watching Double Indemnity the other day on DVD, because in the last year they've had that great new re-release of it. And the mechanism of Edward G. Robinson, you know, lighting his cigars and you know, the whole mechanics of that is not only visually fascinating and artistic, but, you know, says a lot about the character. It does create character, and people smoke. You know, why are we trying to change reality from what people see? People smoke. I can go down the street and see people smoking everywhere. You know, are we going to ban that? Well, we pretty much have inside, but, you know, I think it's a dangerous trend, and I think that's sort of silly given everything else that is in films today. That, you know, and what glorifies. I mean, when Fidel passes and they do the Fidel biopic, is he going to be his sans cigar? You know, I don't know.
Well, and what's next? Are they going to ban, like, hamburgers and French fries from the movies?
Well,
because
I think, you know,
for you.
And that's clearly, I mean, there's a very clear movement driven by trial lawyers to, you know, try to do the same thing with fattening food. that they're doing, that they did with smoking, and to exact this large amount of money and to demonize it. And hey, there's no doubt we could all eat healthier as a society. It's a terrible thing, but you know, at what point do we get where you have no choices left in your life?
The other thing that bothers me is this whole theory is based on the idea that they've done studies. You know, you say, well, what makes you think that if a kid sees someone smoking, they're going to take it up? Well, they've done studies. Well, I'm suspicious of all of these studies because they're all financed by someone with an agenda.
Yeah, you know, it seems to me, and I think common sense would tell a lot of people, kids learn to smoke from other kids. They don't go to a movie and say, oh, wow, you know, I saw Jake Gyllenhaal smoking a cigarette, and now I want to smoke too. I mean, you know, cigarette advertising for years and years and years glamorized cigarettes. I mean, there's no doubt about that. And banning advertising on the public airwaves, since they are the public forum, it seems to make some bit of sense. Maybe you can make some sense out of it because it had gone so far sort of the other direction. And at that time, of course, there was not the information we have now about the health aspects. Yeah. But people today are making informed choices. I mean, it's a terribly addictive drug. Nicotine is worse than a lot of other legal drugs now. There's plenty of illegal drugs that are much less harmful than alcohol and nicotine. Yes. You know, so I mean, we have hypocrisy sort of upon hypocrisy, and but this is the political mood of our nation post 9/11, where we're all really scared and sort of retreating into our sort of core beliefs. And it's not surprising at all to me.
We want to know what you think. Send in your emails, your suggestions. How would you rate a movie for smoking?